Hello, my name is Franco Tenelli and this is Science of Singing. Today's topic, Rubato, the last freedom you have. Imagine for a second that one plays music exactly the way it's written, following a mechanical, unchanged tempo with absolutely precise time value. In Euclidean geometry we study at school, there are no points that cannot be found on a frozen surface of Newtonian time-space chart. Every point has a certain position in space and time. In 19th century, metronomes were introduced and fixed tempo started to appear in certain scores. Even in music, musicians started to rely on mechanical toys. It was so counterintuitive that many musicians rebelled against this approach. As a result, 19th century mechanical tempis were substituted by tempi rubati and ad libitums by most prominent figures of that time, and especially by Frédéric Chopin. Let's see what Jan Paderewski writes about so-called mechanical Newtonian understanding of time. There is no absolute rhythm. In the course of the dramatic development of a musical composition, the initial themes change their character. Consequently, rhythm changes also, and in conformity with that character, it has to be energetic or languishing, crisp or elastic, steady or capricious. Jan Paderewski. Now let's see the definition of rubato from Maurizio Pollini. Rubato must emerge spontaneously from the music. It can't be calculated, but must be totally free. It's not even something you can teach. Each performer must feel it on its own basis of his or her sensitivity. There is no magic formula. To assume otherwise would be ridiculous. Maurizio Pollini. Let's look at the science of the 17th and 19th century and its influence on human thinking, including culture. Science of the 17th and 19th century held mechanical view on universe as unchanged structure where space was invariable and time was a moving evenly forward to future type of the coordinate. It is strange to say, but musicians were more sensitive towards the reality than scientists, and noticed that time can slow down or fasten up. Ticking like clocks, metronomes are not absolute anymore. When improvisation in classical music was abandoned, tempi fixed in editorial editions, there was nothing left in terms of freedom for performer. Before, in Baroque era, tempi were fixed, but performers could improvise on a given tempo, something like swinging jazz in 20th century. Romantic music in 19th century was a revolt against mechanical understanding of a tempo, as fixed as the universe itself. Later, mechanical understanding of the universe was changed by Einstein's theory of relativity, where time was a relative value. Niels Bohr, father of quantum mechanics, went even farther than Einstein himself, saying that there is no such a data that can tell us precisely where the matter or electrons or neutrons are at the given time. Their location seemed to depend on the observer rather than an objective location of a particle. That strange behavior in physics is called rubato in music. The note could appear freely anywhere where a performer felt to play. The tempo or time could slow or accelerate depending on the will of a player. Since music became more complex in rhythm and harmony, and improvisations were more and more difficult, the only freedom in classical music was changing tempo, or as we know now, tempo rubato, or stolen time. Many think that tempo rubato should be applied only to romantic music, namely Chopin. So when we have such a phenomenon as Glenn Gould playing Bach in tempo rubato, many musicians, especially Baroque ones, revolt against such freedom, saying that in Bach times, tempi were metronomic and therefore Bach's music should be played with no rubatos. One can easily agree looking at these arguments superficially and say no to Bach Rubato if we forget one important detail. In Bach's time, musicians improvised everything they played, like today's jazz musicians, in stable written time frame. Today's Baroque musicians at best can write their own cadences, but ask him to improvise on the whole piece, and during the performance he will look at you as if you were crazy. So today's Baroque music lost its essential core, freedom in improvisation, and only preserved so-called style, which is dead because of important elements missing. Fortunately or unfortunately, history repeats itself. And by analogy, something like that happens today in jazz music. Fewer and fewer musicians know how to really improvise. They learn styles in schools, but not encouraged to make their own. Great jazz pianist Bill Evans was warning jazz pedagogy to give less time on styles and more on individual improvisations. He said, essence of jazz is not as much as a style, but the freedom of improvisation. And that's why he called Bach and Chopin true jazz musicians. Today's jazz musicians often cheat by showing not real improvisation, but rather some home preparations, or at best they improvise with somebody else's phrasing, or they learn licks and just combine them, thinking they create something, but in fact mimicking somebody else's ideas. Now back to classical approach. In the beginning of the 20th century, freedom of interpretation reached its peak with Caruso, Shaliapin, but was cut short by new-coming dictatorship ideologies like Mussolini, Stalin, Franco, Adolf Hitler, and followed by musical dictatorship like Toscanini. Toscanini believed that in music should be only one boss, conductor. Freedom of soloists should be reduced to follow the boss. Musical notions like rubato, col canto were interpreted as conductors' freedom and not the soloists. Singers were educated to keep ignorant, especially about term col canto, meaning freedom of a soloist and a total subordination of an accompanist to the will of a singer. Some special score editions even abandoned term rubato or col canto. Arturo Toscanini is a very controversial figure of the 20th century. Some musicians consider him as a genius. I personally think that Toscanini was a mediocre musician with great music memory and very good sense of metronomic tempo, but no will to be an accompanist to anyone. Of a great maestro was given to him for rather his political boldness to oppose Italy's dictator Mussolini. That was a very hypocritical from Toscanini's side, because he was in the same party with Mussolini and even competed with him on the same ideological background, and only after losing the election he turned against him politically. So former fascist Toscanini turns to be a political democrat, or does he? One of the reasons that jazz became popular in the 20th century because mainstream classical music catastrophically lacked freedom. Freedom is an essential part of human creativity, and its restriction eventually brings art to stagnation. Classical musicians, since they a long time forgot how to improvise, had only freedom in rubato. But rubato is always unique, can't be taught or instructed. It can be only encouraged by another free musician who understands that freedom himself. When one player mimics playing style or rubato of another player or singer, he is no more but a cheater. One cannot take somebody's freedom and claim it as his own. Let's say what Stevenson says about free society. My definition of a free society: where it is safe to be unpopular. A.E. Stevenson. Ask yourself the same question. Is it safe to be unpopular in your musical environment? Can you survive as a musician being what you truly are? Can you go against established rules in music if there is a danger of not surviving you in that fight? That question explains why we have only few in the world who dare to be themselves, have guts to be themselves, Others are musical conformists that sooner or later become musical academics full of accumulated knowledge and totally ignorant about true talents that emerge throughout the matrix of their own prejudices, that only recognize creativity in the past and suppress any new ideas that is not included in their library of dead writers. This was Franco Tenelli's Science of Singing. Rubato, the last freedom you have.